Does your business provide a quality service or product? If the answer is yes, then there is a combination of tactics that can be customized to fit your unique business that makes your business super profitable, creates wealth, and makes a difference in the process. I know this because I've built a few tiny businesses to more than $70 million. You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Radio Show. Conversations with self-made millionaires and high-level entrepreneurs that will grow your business. Hey, it's Travis Lane Jenkins. Welcome to episode number 114 of the Entrepreneurs Radio Show, a production of RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com, where each and every week I'm going to connect you with self-made millionaires and high-level entrepreneurs that explain their journey to success. Now, today I'm going to introduce you to John Warrillow. John is the founder of the Sellability Score. It's a cloud-based assessment tool for business owners to use that basically assesses the sellability of your company. Now, John is the author of a best-selling book titled Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You, which was recognized by Fortune and Inc. magazine as one of the best business books of 2011. Building a business that can thrive without you is one of my favorite topics because it's a common mistake that most business owners make. If you have a business that cannot operate with you, regardless of whether you're making good money or not, you have a job. And I don't want that for you. I want you to have a business, an asset, that you can go on vacation, that you can do things, that's an emergency could come up and you could not be available for some extended period of time, and you still have the financial security and all the other things that come from a business running without you. And, of course, coincidentally, having this type of business is also the pathway to having the time freedom and the financial freedom to do as you please and basically live life on your own terms, which, if you're anything like me, was the whole reason why I went into business for myself. Now, before we get started, a quick thank you to Pat Joel from the United States for the 5-star rating review on iTunes. He says the show sets the tone for his day. I love to hear that. I really appreciate that you've taken the time to write the review and share all the positive feedback. So thank you very much for that, Pat Joel. One last thing before we get started, you can take the interviews with you or this show with you on the go through either iTunes, Stitcher, or Android. Just go to RockstarEntrepreneurNetwork.com and click on either one of those buttons that apply for you and how you like to listen when you're on the go, and it will take you directly to the podcast where you can subscribe if that's something that you want to do. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get down to business. What do you say? Without further ado, welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Hey, I'm super excited about the topic that we're going to talk about today, but before we get to that, can you give me the background of what brought you to today?
I've been involved in, 4 startups that I've ultimately exited. One of them, most recently, was a quantitative market research business that was acquired by a public company in 2008. And over that four businesses, I guess I've learned a little bit about what makes a business sellable, and sort of tried to document and codify some of those thoughts in that book, Built to Sell. So that's really what got us to where we are today.
Well, but how did you graduate to this level? So what were those 4 businesses that you built, and what was the success of those along the way?
Yeah, they started off in a very typical, I think, entrepreneurial way, in the sense that they started off as service businesses where you're hanging out your shingles. So right. I started out putting together a radio production business where we produced custom stuff, and it was a classic sell-do business, right? You'd get a project from a customer, you'd work feverishly to get it out, and then you'd sort of send the invoice. It was a sell-do business, very very difficult to transition. Moved it to be more in bed with a large broadcasting company, and so that was a much more scalable model. I also had a marketing agency that the character in the book talks is most aligned with this marketing agency, where again, very sell-do. What I mean by that is you run around at the beginning of the month trying to find something to sell, a service to sell, you sell it, and then you focus on executing. And then over time, started to figure out that what was really important to building a scalable business is doing one thing better than anybody else, as opposed to being sort of a mile wide and an inch deep. I inversed that, right? So we started to get really good at one thing. In the quantitative market research business, we started to focus on studying the SMB, or small medium business market, and we ultimately built up a subscriber list of Fortune 500 companies that subscribe to our research. So people like Google and Apple and Microsoft and Wells Fargo and those kinds of guys subscribed. And so that was a key lesson for me. The idea of, a lot of, I think, service businesses in particular, they do a great job. They're passionate about what they do. Certainly in my case, I felt really like we were serving our clients. And so good clients come back. They ask you to do more and more things. And pretty soon you're going way outside of what you're really qualified to do, because clients want to give you more work if you perform for them. And so pretty soon we end up, with 3 clients generating 80% of the revenue and doing stuff that's way outside of our comfort zone. Of course, that's the definition of an unsellable company, because the only person in the company that's qualified to do the work is probably the owner, because they're the subject matter expert. And so there's just nothing to sell at the end of the day. So again, it was that subtle but I think important shift. Instead of being an inch sort of wide and a mile wide and an inch deep with a lot of customers, really inverting that and doing one thing for a lot of customers.
So to me, it sounds like your first service business, you finally, after growing that business and noticing what the bottlenecks and restrictions were with that business model, because I've gone through the same trajectory to where, that's kind of a feast and famine that you explain. You sell it and then you do it, and then, you're out of work. You need to go sell some more, right? And then there's even a capacity constraint. So it sounded to me like you pivoted that business into that, what did you say, a radio or a marketing business?
Right, like a radio broadcasting.
Oh, a radio broadcasting, okay.
We partnered with a radio broadcaster, so they had all the infrastructure and so forth. So yeah, that was one that was important. Yeah, it's probably the most important thing in the shift. Probably the most important thing is doing one thing. In the book, it talks about the marketing agency decided to focus on logos because they were really good at doing that. The second, I think, step in the process, Travis, is creating recurring revenue. So having some annuity stream, whether that's a service contract. So, a lot of people say, well, my business doesn't lend itself to recurring revenue. I'm not a subscription company. I'm not a software company. But, virtually any business, I believe you can create some recurring revenue. I mean, take the typical, say, carpet cleaner. A sell-do model would be like, hey, we clean carpets. Let us know when you have a dirty carpet. Right. A subscription business would be say, hey, listen, your carpet gets dirty every 2 or 3 weeks. If you're an office building, we'll come preemptively every 14 days. We'll set up a service contract, and we'll come. You don't have to ask us to come. We're going to come and clean your carpets. That's a much more sellable business, because an acquirer coming in can look at it and say, well, they've got these service contracts and they're renewing at a decent clip. And so that's the essence of building recurring revenue.
Right. Where does systemization fall into that whole thing? Because that's a big part. And again, I figured a lot of these things out on my own, and I don't want to come off as if I figured them out quickly, because it wasn't. It took me 15 years to figure it out, and really it come from the desire to no longer want to answer the same questions or solve the same problems or all of that other stuff. So ultimately, I systemized the business so that it could operate without me, and that's another big piece of what I perceive you to be talking about.
Sure, and that's a big part. And I think you can categorize. First of all, one of the best ways to see how your business is going to perform and whether you've got a systems issue is to go on vacation, right? So leave the mobile phone at home or don't turn it on and go on vacation. Start small, 2-3 days, try for a week, try for 2 weeks. And what I'd also recommend is you add one extra buffer day. And the extra day is there so that you tell your staff, look, you're going to be back on a Thursday. And in fact, plan to be back on a Wednesday. And use that day to really understand where things broke down when you were away. And when you figure out where things broke down, bucket those problem areas. I found that they often fall into 3 buckets. There's mistakes people make. Bob, you got to turn off the air conditioner before you leave at night. That's a very tactical mistake that you can correct. There's a second kind of project where it's what I call a bottleneck project, where things didn't get done because they're waiting for your approval.
Right.
And the third project is those strategic projects where you're leading. So by definition, when you're gone, nothing happens. And so for the first bucket of questions, those questions that come up that are very tactical, you've just got to correct the behavior, right? Like write an instruction manual, explain to people how it's done, explain that at 5 o'clock on a Thursday, you close up the shop and you turn off the air conditioning, and here's the button you push. Like it can be very tactical and make sure everybody knows what the deal is. For the second kind of projects, you've really got to tell people where you want to be involved and where you expect them to run with the ball without you. And that could be at a dollar level. It could be at a point in the project. But usually a lot of employees are afraid, to move forward in some cases because, the boss will want to see that before we commit. And in many cases, the boss doesn't want to see it, and it frustrates the boss when they. And so, as the owner, I think you've just got to be really explicit as to when you need to be involved in those bottleneck projects. And then on the strategic projects, the third bucket, those come in 2 flavors: the ones that you inherit by default, and the ones that you pick because you should be leading them. And so for the latter group, the ones you should be leading, continue to lead and expect that when you're on vacation, they're not going to move forward and plan for that. But the other ones, the ones you inherit by default, reassign to someone who's better suited to deal with those projects. As the owner, by definition, if no one else steps up, you're the guy that has to, or the gal that has to run those strategic projects that aren't necessarily your forte. And so reassign those. And so just by going through that bucketing process, Travis, I found that taking vacation can be a great way to really start to systematize the business.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most business owners are in a position to where they can't take a vacation. They're so busy being busy that they just can't afford, the potential calamities that could happen just due to the way that their business is set up, right?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of steering clear of any tactical stuff in the beginning of the day. So Stephen Covey wrote the book on this and did the best job. He talked about, most of us think about projects along 2 dimensions, that which is urgent and those that are important, and not necessarily, those aren't necessarily the same thing. And he said that most of us do what is both urgent and important first thing, which is obvious. So there's a customer's angry and you've got to go deal with it. So that's obvious. It's what we do next that defines, I think, our success. Most people seek out that endorphin rush of ticking off the urgent yet not important projects. So responding to email, getting back to some supplier who isn't really that strategic. Those are the types of things that give you that little mini adrenaline boost when you tick them off your to-do list, but you get to the end of the day and you don't feel like you've accomplished anything because you're just reacting. And so the most successful, and again, I'm quoting Covey here, this is not my thinking, this is Covey, the most successful folks said, hang on, when you've dealt with the urgent and important, go to the not urgent but important, those strategic projects that nobody's going to die if you don't handle them today, but they are critical long-term to your success. Those folks who go to that second quadrant are the ones that achieve, I think, the most in life.
Right. So all of these things that you're talking about, I completely agree. How do you go about mapping, or do you map this out, and do you write all of this out? I know how I did it for mine, but I'm really curious. How did you go about doing that?
Sure. So, I mean, in the first step, really figuring out what you can be the best at the world at. I use something called the trifecta of scale. So trifecta being obviously a betting term, but essentially what you're looking for is a product or service that has three attributes. It's teachable to employees, it's valuable to customers, and it's repeatable. TVR. And so what the first step of the process is, if you sell 100 things today or 100 different services, really start putting them through the lens of what is teachable, valuable, and repeatable. So, for example, a photographer that I'm aware of, or a photography business, I should say, based in Danbury, UK, went through this process. And they looked at all their products and services that they sold, all the different photographs they took, cricket teams, rugby teams, et cetera, weddings, et cetera, and said, what is teachable to employees, valuable to customers, and repeatable? And what they discovered was a lot of the stuff that they did was actually low on the degree to which you can teach it, because it's an art, not a science. It's an interpretation. It's photography. It's by nature, it's a very creative service. And what they discovered, however, was that when they focused on school photographs, they found something that is teachable, valuable, repeatable, because you can teach young photographers, not necessarily well trained or not necessarily famous, but young photographers who want experience. You can teach them the formula, and they've got an 8-minute formula. They use a seating chart and stuffed animals to get the kids to laugh at the right time. So they've got a whole formula they get the photographers to follow. And that's valuable to the people who hire the photographers. In the case in the UK, which is where this company is located, it's headmasters of these schools, because the headmasters want the kids learning in the classrooms and not goofing around waiting for the school photograph, taking a couple hours in the auditorium. So it's valuable to customers. And, of course, it's repeatable because as parents, we want to document the progress of our kids, right? We want the picture every year that shows our kids' legacy in school. So it's got a recurring revenue engine because we bring that school photography company back in every year. So that's a business. Again, most people would say, well, you can't scale a photography business, or you can't systematize a photography business. Well, if you look at the business in a traditional way, no, you're probably right. But if you look at it through the lens of what is teachable, valuable, repeatable, you get the school photography company.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think even the extreme right brain stuff, well, maybe not extreme right brain, but a lot of right brain things can be taught. There is a formula really to practically everything that you do out there. Now, what I found is you need to map out all aspects of your business, sales, operations. And for me, it's it can be quite a complicated process. And what I had to do to really get my arms around the entire business, and it was a business that I'd run for many, many years at the time when I had done it, over 15 years, maybe even 16 years at the time. What I did is I created flowcharts that showed the preferred path for everything. And then I started showing potential deviations of when people don't follow those paths or when a problem. And I'm not talking about employees, but say sometimes if we were looking at a sales funnel, sometimes your client doesn't come in at the top of the funnel, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so sometimes things, even delivering something to a client, maybe they don't take a certain action. Well, there's a way to deal with getting that resolved, and I map all of those things out and then write all the processes out. Have you ever gone to that level in systemizing a business, and what's your feelings on that?
Certainly, yeah. Workflowing and documenting visually,
right.
I think helps. It helps employees. The old saying, like some employees are going to learn it better if they read it. Some are going to learn it by doing it. Some are going to learn better by seeing it. So if you can show them the systems in those three formats, you're going to be able to really educate everybody. And some people and a lot of entrepreneurs, I would argue, are not great systems builders. So,
right.
Have you ever heard of the Kolbe Index?
Yes.
KOLB. So Kathy Colby looked at how our natural behaviors are, and she categorized it's kind of like a Myers-Briggs with one of 4 streams of behavior, or gave us a score on 0 to 10 on these 4 sort of natural instinctive behaviors.
Right.
If I'm getting them right, one was fact finder, the degree to which you seek facts before taking a decision. Mm-hmm. Second one was follow through, the degree to which you build systems and you adhere to systems. Third one is quick start, the degree to which you start lots of things and are animated and so forth. And the fourth one is implementer, where you're good at your hands, you're good at fixing things physically. And what I've seen is a lot of entrepreneurs are really high on quick start.
Right.
So lots of ideas, lots of, but very low on follow through. Sounds like you got a train going through your office there, Travis.
Yeah, it's in the background. Everything's okay over here.
Yeah, okay, good. But low on follow through. And so they're not necessarily, you as the entrepreneur may not be the right person to lead the project of systemizing. So, right. But so what you can do is hire a project manager, someone who's strong on systems, and say, look, this is a vision that I'm trying to create here. Help me build the system. Mm-hmm. Just because you want to systematize your business doesn't mean that you personally have to lead that process.
Great point. Yeah, great point. Most people feel like because they're they possess the seat at the head of the table, they need to do all of those things. And I actually enjoy flow charting those things and then looking for what's missing, because it's a very tedious, long, drawn-out process. But the bigger picture of what's going on is a lot of times, depending on the size of your business, most people only have a very myopic view of what your business is and what it does. They don't have the big picture. And whenever you're able to draw something out like this, flowcharts and things like that, and this sounds really geeky, flowcharts convey a lot of things, several things that words have a hard time conveying sometimes in a big picture aspect.
Neat.
Yeah. Question, define quantitative research for everybody that's listening.
Sure. So when you're using numbers to prove a point as opposed to feelings. So there's 2 types of market research. One is qualitative market research, where you're trying to gather people's their feelings about something. So you might do a focus group with 8 people and say, what do you think of Rick Perry as a governor? Let's talk about his strengths and weaknesses. That's a qualitative research approach. Quantitative research is where you're numerically and empirically proving a point. So it would have typically closed-ended questions. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague, the Net Promoter Score question? That is a quantitative research study. And so you're getting an empirical, hard data point.
And so I have my own guesstimation at this, but I'm really interested in what your guess at this number is. What percentage of business owners do you think drive the core metrics and decisions of their business based on quantitative information?
So quantitative information being financial statements, revenue, sales projections, that kind of stuff, versus how do they feel?
Well, yeah. So lead sources, lead conversions, sales conversions, all of the metrics that drive, the growth of the business.
Geez, we never looked at that. I don't know. I wouldn't even be able to take a guess. But it sounds like you've done the research.
I have, and it's surprising. 90% of business owners at under $1 million do not drive their business based on quantitative information. And that's the reason why so few businesses ever reach $1 million. Not that $1 million is special, because it's very easy to have $1 million business that's not profitable as well, right? Although it's emblematic that most small businesses never really grow to that next level, because it's very hard to tell what is and is not working. And, you've got to eliminate what's not working, and you've got to double down for a lack of a better term or for a simplistic term, on the things that's working for you and continually optimize. And so it's really surprising that it's right at 93%, over 90% that don't use empirical data to make those decisions. And it just completely blew me away. Does that surprise you?
Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of business owners are. I think there's a few things perhaps going on. I mean, a lot of business owners are totally content. They have a $400,000 a year gross revenue business. They're able to pull out 25% profits at the end of the year. They run all their lifestyle expenses through the business, and they're happy. And they've got 10 customers, and they know them all by name. They know their kids' names, and life is good. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I think that's a segment of the market. I don't know what proportion it is, but it's a segment of the market where I think the challenge a little bit comes in, and this, at Sellability Score, we look at this stuff all the time because we assess the sellability of companies. That company is not really an asset. It's a job for that person. It happens to be that the IRS thinks it's a company, but in reality, it's not. It's a job.
Right.
And so there's no equity being built up, and where we, I think, need to draw the distinction is that there's no big payday at the end of the line for that business. They've got to take all their money out of that business that they can and invest it outside of the business because there's nothing that they can sell. Whereas another business owner, probably the ones that are using quantitative insight more aggressively, says, no, I want to build an asset that I can sell and ride off into the sunset. And that's a different business. That's a business where they are using quantitative metrics. One of the reasons quantitative metrics is so important to building a sellable company is because that's how acquirers will evaluate your business. So right. To get them excited about buying your company, you might say, our revenue is X and our profit is Y. But to get them really juiced up, and what will be necessary to actually get them to write a check, is to say, and here's our marketing funnel. We have 10,000 unique users to our website every month. We're able to convert about 2,000 to filling out a form. Of the 2,000, we get 100 to go to a meeting. Of the 100, we get 2 second meetings or 50 second meetings, and 50 second meetings, we convert 10 of them. With that level of data and sophistication around conversion rates and funneling, the acquirer can then take that data and say, okay, well, if we graft that onto our customer base, instead of 1,000 customers, which you have, we have 3 million customers, then if we have the same metrics, they can really start to understand how that business will perform. So, metrics are important for running the business day to day, but if you ever want to sell it, they become essential.
Right. And the interesting thing is the business that's sellable is easier to run.
It's a funny dynamic, and
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. We use the term internally at Sellability Score, the ultimate litmus test for your business is, would someone buy it? Whether you want to sell it is a totally separate question. But if you think about it, the ultimate acid test, is, would someone write you a check for your business tomorrow? If the answer to that is no, then, really you do have a job as it's structured today. That's not to say you couldn't structure it, but today, even though it may be a very well-paying job, there is no end of the rainbow. Right.
I once heard it said that if your business cannot, and it's very close to what you had said just a minute ago, if your business cannot operate against you or operate without you, and you're making decent money, really all you have is just a well-paying job.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a confusion there because a lot of people let the emotional aspects of the blood, sweat, and tears that they've put in the business confuse the difference between, what we're calling a job and a sellable business. Now you've created a really cool tool that determines how sellable someone's business is. Can anybody use it, and what do they have to do to use it?
Yeah, just go to sellabilityscore.com and you can use it. What basically you'll do is answer a 13-minute questionnaire, and we will assess you on the 8 key drivers of sellability. So you'll get an overall score and then a quantitative score on the 8 key drivers of sellability. And what's really interesting, and we've just learned this recently, it really validates a lot of the things we're doing. We've discovered that those companies that score 80 or above on a possible 100-point scale, those companies that score 80 or above will statistically, it's been borne out and proven that they will likely go on to get an offer 71% greater than the average business that scores on an average. So there's a very quantitative payoff for you to lift your score north of 80. So what we do is we give you your overall score, and then we say, okay, these are the 8 key drivers of sellability, and here's how you're performing on each one of them. So you get a score on something. Well, one of the ones we score is something called hub and spoke, which measures the degree to which your business is dependent on you personally. Something we were talking about earlier, and the importance of building systems. Another one is the hierarchy of recurring revenue, which is the degree to which you've got subscription-based or annuity-based or service contract-based revenue that kind of re-ups and automatically happens every month. So anyways, there are 8 key drivers. You get a score on each, and you can see which, kind of like a pilot running, flying a plane, you can see which dial you need to turn to improve your score.
Wonderful. Great information. What book or program made an impact on you related to business that you would recommend, and why would you recommend it?
Well, I'm a big fan of Bo Burlingham. Do you know Bo?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, he's an editor-at-large of Inc. magazine. He wrote the book Small Giants, along with he co-wrote with Jack Stack A Stake in the Outcome and The Great Game of Business.
Okay.
He also wrote The Knack with Norm Brodsky. So he's a prolific writer and an exceptional guy. He wrote this book called Small Giants, and it was one of these wonderful books that profiled companies that the tagline was companies that choose to be great instead of big. And the idea is that there's, growing at all costs has costs, right? So most companies have to take on outside investors. They've got to take on venture capitalists or angel investors, or they've got to share equity with partners to grow at all costs. And his argument was that there is this small but growing faction of companies that are growing within themselves, and they're more focused on building a great company. So he uses the description or the story of Anchor Steam Brewery in San Francisco, or Patagonia, the guys that make the clothing, as wonderfully successful, more money than you'd ever need to live on. These businesses generate lots of income for their founders. But they've chosen explicitly a different growth strategy, and that is to try to focus on growing a great company as opposed to just a big company. And that, for me, I remember reading it. It kind of gave me an excuse to take the foot off the gas for a moment and actually just kind of sit back and think about what would be the right thing to do to make sure the product was as good as possible and the culture was as good as possible, and we were building something that was going to be a good legacy, as opposed to where's the next sale coming from. So I really like that book. I'm a big fan. Small Giants is the book.
Excellent. I'm going to put that on my read list. What's one of your favorite tools or pieces of technology that you've recently discovered that you would recommend to other business owners, and why?
I'm an Evernote addict. I love Evernote. So Evernote, if you don't know, allows you to take notes. They can be text notes. You can upload pictures. And what's really fantastic about Evernote is that it all syncs with whatever device you're using. So if you're on your desktop, you can make an Evernote. And then when you're walking around later on your iPhone and you open up Evernote, it'll be there because it syncs bidirectionally. If you've got your iPad out, you're at a conference, you make a note, suddenly that note then appears on your desktop in your Evernote at your desktop at work. So I'm a huge fan. They use tags so you can tag things. So I've got tags for sales and marketing and for each of my employees, so I know what we talked about last. Every time I think of, I've got to talk to Bob about X, instead of firing Bob off an email and filling up his inbox, I'll make a note. in Bob's Evernote saying, "Oh, I want to ask him about X." And so it's just a very cool tool. Do you use Evernote, Travis?
No, and I've heard it recommended a few times. I'm going to have to convert because I recently had a bad experience with iPhone where I lost a year and a half worth of notes.
Oh, dear.
And so, I think Evernote would have helped me circumvent that problem. So,
yeah, it's all backed up in the cloud.
Yeah. I mean, and a year and a half of ideas and notes, that's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna convert. You've talked me into it. Hey, what quote would best summarize your belief or your attitude in business?
I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett, and I love his quote. I'm going to misquote him here. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect of, he likes being a shareholder of Gillette because he likes going to bed at night knowing that throughout the night, 1 billion or 2 men around the world are going to grow demand for his product, the razor blade, and without him doing anything, without him running a single ad, without him stimulating demand in any way, shape, or form, a couple billion men will grow up, will wake up in the morning and need to shave.
Right.
And I just love that idea. It's about recurring revenue, of course, and Dollar Shave Club, good subscription company that I wrote about in my new book, is certainly following that mantra. But it's the idea that if you could find a business where demand just recurs, it has a natural cadence to it. That's a great model to follow.
Cool. Hey, one last thing. If you had to start over today, what would you do to get the fastest results?
Less stuff, more people. Again, I think the natural inclination for most startups is get a couple clients, figure out what they want, listen to them. And every self-help book in the world says, listen to your clients, be client-centric, focus on your clients, blah, 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 blah. I'm not a huge believer in that. I think what you need to do is figure out what you can be the best at the world in, number one. Number two, go find some customers that care about that thing. That's a very different way of starting a business than go win some clients and figure out what you can sell them.
Right.
What I find is that go win some clients, figure out what you can sell them approach to starting a business. It often happens in service businesses. Is it leads to a service business with 3 clients, a ceiling on of $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in total revenue that you just cannot go past because there are only so many hours in the day, and you've got a job, not a business, and a stressful one at that. Whereas if you say, we can be the world's best at making wine carafes or making mouses, I'm just picking up things on my table in front of me, and just do that one thing, then there are customers in the world that will value you for that if you're in fact good at doing that. It's then a much, I think, easier business to create is to go find the customers that care about that.
Great advice. How do people connect with you?
Sellabilityscore.com.
And what's the name of your book?
The new book is called The Automatic Customer, and the current book is called Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You. The new book, The Automatic Customer, comes out in February of 2015 by Random House. If you want a heads up, it talks about 9 different subscription models and how to convert a business in virtually any industry into a subscription model. If you want to get a sneak preview of the book and the 9 models, you can go to www.theautomaticcustomer.com, and you can fill out the little form there, and then you'll be able to download instantly the 9 subscription models, and we'll also notify you when the book comes out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Remember that you can find all the links to the books and the resources mentioned in the show notes. Just go to rockstarentrepreneur.network.com. It's a new site that we've been building out for quite a while now that's completely focused on giving you resources to help you grow your business. Before I close the show today, remember that I'll be creating, I don't know how long you've been listening, but I've mentioned in past episodes that I'll be creating new types of episodes in the very near future where I'll answer your questions involving any type of problems going on with your business. All you got to do is go to rockstarentrepreneur.network.com and opt in. What will happen is you'll get my personal email and a quick message from me, and then Send me a detailed message about your business and what you're dealing with, and I'll give you my advice on air without sharing your last name. So just be sure and give me enough perspective about what's going on, and I'll give you my feedback. And we'll be creating new episodes with that here very, very soon. My quote for today comes from Frederick B. Wilcox. And the quote reads, "Progress always involves risk. You can't steal second base and keep your foot on first base." This is Travis Lane Jenkins signing off for now to your incredible success. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care, my friend.